Lila had always dreamed of giving birth in a peaceful, natural way at home. She wanted to bring her baby into the world surrounded by the love and comfort of her own space, in water, without the need for any doctors or medical machines. She had spent so much of her life feeling disconnected from her body after a series of painful miscarriages. 2 of her pregnancies had ended in heartbreak, and the memory of those sterile hospital rooms, the coldness of the doctors, and the endless medical procedures haunted her. She had felt so powerless, so broken, and as if her body wasn't capable of carrying life. But now, after years of waiting, Lila and her husband Ethan were pregnant again. This time, Lila was determined to give birth her way. She had read about water births and heard stories of women who had given birth naturally at home, and she felt deep in her heart that this was the right choice for her. Her body had proven to her that it was strong enough to carry a child again, and she believed that she could trust it to bring their baby into the world in the way she envisioned. Ethan was nervous, but he supported her decision. He loved Lila, and he knew how badly she wanted this. But he was also concerned, especially after everything they had been through. His worries weren't just about the birth itself, but also about Lila's health and what could go wrong. He wasn't sure this was the best decision, but he respected Lila's desire to be in control, to take charge of her body and her birth experience. After weeks of planning and preparation, Lila decided to share her decision with the world. She posted a message online, telling her followers that she was going to have a natural, water birth at home. She titled the post, "My Journey to a Pure Birth." It was not just an announcement, but a statement of her conviction and determination. She had waited so long for this moment, and now she was going to make it happen, no matter what. The post was filled with optimism, excitement, and hope for the future. At first, the response was positive. Many of her followers congratulated her and wished her the best, sending words of support and encouragement. But as the hours passed, the comments started rolling in. What Lila had expected to be a celebration turned into something much darker. Instead of messages of joy, she found a flood of criticism, judgment, and even anger. Some of the comments were harsh and unfiltered. "You're putting your baby at risk," one person wrote. "Why would you choose a dangerous birth at home? Do you care about your child? Or just about your brand?" Another said. The more Lila read, the more the guilt and fear crept into her heart. She felt like she was being attacked, not just for her decision, but for her pain, her past struggles, and her desire to take control of her body. There were comments warning her that she was gambling with her baby's life. She had already lost 2 pregnancies, and now she was being told that this was a decision that could end in disaster. She couldn't help but feel the weight of their words. They hit right where it hurt most, in the deepest parts of her heart that had already been shattered. Lila gripped her phone tightly, her fingers trembling. The words stung, each one tightening the knot of fear in her chest. She had spent so many years believing that her body was the problem, that it had failed her when she needed it most. And now, just as she was finally trusting herself again, these harsh voices were telling her that she was wrong, that she was being foolish. Ethan rolled over in bed beside her, sensing that something was wrong. He reached out, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "What's going on?" he asked softly. Lila didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stood up and pulled her robe tight around her body. She walked to the kitchen, trying to steady her shaking hands as she poured herself a cup of tea. The warmth of the cup helped calm her a little, but the words on her phone still echoed in her mind. As the tea steamed in front of her, Lila remembered her last visit to the obstetrician's office. The doctor's face had been grave as he delivered the news that their pregnancy had ended in miscarriage. The sterile machines, the cold hospital room, and the feeling of failure that had washed over her were still so fresh in her memory. The doctor had spoken in technical terms, as though she was just another patient to be processed. Lila had felt powerless, unable to change the outcome. It was a feeling she never wanted to experience again. When she opened her email, she saw a message from her best friend, Grace. It was blunt, but Lila knew Grace was only trying to help. "Lila, don't do this. Please. After all you've been through, why risk it? Think about your baby." Lila's chest tightened as she read the words. Her heart ached with old pain, but she pushed it down. She had made her decision, and she wasn't going to change it. She closed the email and took a deep breath. She had to believe in herself. She couldn't let the fear win. That afternoon, Ethan found her sitting in the living room, scrolling through her post and reading the growing number of comments. He looked at her with worry in his eyes. "You saw them, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Lila nodded, her jaw clenched tight. "I saw them. I don't care," she said, her voice hard. "I know what those places do to me, Ethan. I can't go back to that. I need this way." Ethan watched her, his concern not fading. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Just promise me you'll be careful, okay?" Lila squeezed his hand. "I will," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. But inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that the doubts were starting to creep in. The weeks passed, and Lila's preparation for the birth continued. She went to birthing classes and practiced the breathing techniques she had learned. She focused on the affirmations, trying to build a mental fortress around herself, a shield against the doubts and fears that kept whispering in the back of her mind. She felt like each kick from her baby was a sign that she was doing the right thing. She believed in her body, and every movement inside her was a confirmation that everything was working the way it should. But Ethan's quiet anxiety never fully left. She could see it in the way he looked at her sometimes, in the way he paused before asking if she was okay. He had never fully agreed with her decision to go without medical supervision, but he had supported her nonetheless. Still, his worries were like an invisible weight between them. One evening, Ethan asked softly, "Are you sure about this, Lila? I mean, what if something goes wrong?" Lila snapped, the words coming out sharper than she intended. "Nothing is going to go wrong. I've been through the worst already. I'm not risking another hospital, another sterile room." The silence between them was thick with unspoken words. Ethan didn't argue, but Lila could feel his frustration. He didn't agree with her, but he wasn't saying it out loud. He just nodded and turned back to his book, the moment hanging heavily between them. Despite the tension, Lila remained firm in her belief. She continued to post updates online, sharing videos about the power of natural birth. She kept telling herself that she was doing the right thing, but each day, the comments grew more critical. Even her loyal followers, the ones who had always supported her, were starting to express doubt. "You're being reckless," one comment said. "You're putting your baby at risk for likes." The pressure was building, and Lila started to feel overwhelmed. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was making a mistake. But she refused to let herself believe it. She couldn't. If she admitted to any fear, any doubt, it would mean she was giving up, and that was something she couldn't do. One morning, Lila woke up with a sense of dread. Her feet and hands were swollen, and she felt more exhausted than usual. She tried to push it aside, telling herself it was just part of the process. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the worry that was beginning to grow inside her. When she received a message from her sister, Susan, telling her to go to the doctor, the old fears came rushing back. "You need to get checked, Lila," Susan wrote. "Think about the baby." Lila's heart clenched, but she refused to let the doubt in. She didn't want to listen to anyone. She didn't want to admit that she was scared. She couldn't. Ethan noticed that Lila wasn't feeling well. He saw the swelling in her feet and the exhaustion in her eyes. "Lila, this isn't right," he said. "We should go to the doctor." But Lila, stubborn as ever, refused. "I know my body," she snapped. "I don't need anyone telling me what to do." But even as she said the words, a part of her felt the fear spreading, gnawing at her from the inside. Her followers had noticed her absence from social media and were starting to ask questions. "Are you okay, Lila? You look tired. Maybe it's time to check in with a professional." Lila didn't want to admit that she was scared. She didn't want to let anyone see her vulnerability. She quickly typed a message, pretending everything was fine. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One day, as she was in the kitchen, Lila suddenly felt a sharp pain in her head. It was so intense that it dropped her to her knees. The world around her spun, and she could barely breathe. Her vision blurred, and her hands were cold and clammy. "Breathe," she told herself, but her breath was shallow and panicked. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was the floor rushing up to meet her. When she woke up, Ethan was above her, his face filled with fear. "Lila, can you hear me?" he said, his voice shaking. Lila tried to respond, but her lips felt numb. She could barely whisper. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped her up and carried her to the car. his steps fast and urgent. "We're going to the hospital," he said firmly. Lila's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what was happening. The hospital, the place she had fought so hard to avoid. The sterile smell, the bright lights, the cold machines. It was all too much. The car ride felt like a blur, but Lila couldn't stop the wave of fear that washed over her. She had tried so hard to avoid this, to trust her body, but now she couldn't escape the reality of the situation. Lila's heart was racing. She had been feeling unwell for a while, but today, things felt different. The doctors had been watching her closely for signs of preeclampsia, a condition that could cause high blood pressure during pregnancy. Lila was scared. Her body felt weak, and she knew the doctors were worried too. "Lila, you're showing signs of severe preeclampsia," the doctor said urgently. "We need to operate immediately to protect both you and the baby." Lila's eyes widened in panic. She had hoped for a natural birth, but now everything was spiraling out of control. She grasped Ethan's hand, her fingers shaking as she tried to focus. Ethan leaned in closer, his voice full of concern. "Lila, you need to let them help you. It's serious. Please." His face was tight with worry. Lila felt the sharp edges of fear sinking into her chest, but something inside her resisted. "I can't. Not like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The room around her began to spin, and her vision blurred, the lights overhead becoming too bright to focus on. Panic clawed at her, and she tried to hold on to consciousness, but everything around her was fading. The weight of her fear, her exhaustion, and the unknown future was too much. Her mind began to slip away. When Lila finally regained consciousness, she found herself in a different place. The lights were harsh and blinding. The sounds of the hospital, soft footsteps, hushed voices, felt far away, muffled. Ethan's face was beside hers, pale and full of worry. His hand was holding hers tightly. "You're okay," he said, his voice soft, but Lila could hear the fear behind it. "You're safe." But something in his eyes wasn't right. There was something else, something he wasn't saying. Lila's heart raced again. What had happened? A nurse stepped into the room, her face serious. She glanced at Ethan before speaking. "Mrs. Parker, your surgery was successful. Your baby girl is here, but we encountered some complications." Lila's chest tightened. "What complications?" she asked, her voice trembling. The nurse took a deep breath, her words coming slowly, like they were meant to cushion the blow. "Your baby has a congenital condition. Her eyes are not fully developed. It seems she may not have sight." A cold wave of dread washed over Lila. Her heart stopped, and the room felt like it was closing in on her. She gasped, her mind struggling to process what the nurse had just said. "What do you mean?" Lila demanded, her voice rising with panic. "What do you mean she might not be able to see?" The nurse's face was gentle, but her words cut through Lila like ice. "Her eyes are not fully developed. She may be blind." Lila felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her. The world around her tilted. The room seemed to spin, and a scream tore from her throat. "No," she cried, her body thrashing in the bed. The pain in her abdomen, the exhaustion from the surgery, all of it faded as her emotions surged. No, this isn't happening. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake." She didn't want to believe it. It couldn't be true. Ethan reached out to hold her, but she pushed him away, her face twisted in desperation and rage. "You knew this, didn't you? You knew this could happen." She was shaking now, barely coherent, her words spilling out in a frantic rush. "I did everything right. I protected her. I trusted my body. I trusted this process. How could this happen?" She couldn't stop the torrent of pain and anger that flooded her. Ethan's voice broke as he tried to stay calm, though his own heart was breaking. "Lila, we need to stay calm. She needs us to stay calm." His voice was low and full of sorrow, but Lila couldn't hear it. All she could hear was the terrible truth of what had just been revealed to her. "Stay calm?" she yelled, her voice breaking. "How am I supposed to stay calm? She'll never see the world. She'll never see anything because of me." Her voice cracked, and she let out a guttural scream, her fists pounding the bed in frustration. Ethan stood by, helpless, watching as Lila unraveled in front of him. His own grief was written on his face, but he stayed silent. His heart was breaking, but he knew she needed him to be strong, to help her through this moment. Lila was beyond reach now, lost in her anguish. Nurses exchanged worried glances, but Ethan lifted a hand, silently asking them to give Lila a moment. His own heart was shattered, but he forced himself to be the calm one, the one who could handle it, even if his own grief was tearing him apart inside. Lila's sobs filled the room, loud and raw, a sound of despair that seemed to echo off the sterile walls. She ripped at her hospital gown, as though trying to tear away the pain, but it wouldn't go away. Her face was wild with grief, her hands trembling as she clutched the sheets. "She'll never see me, Ethan. She'll never see the world," she screamed, her body heaving with sobs. Ethan stepped forward, his voice trembling. "She's still our daughter. She still needs us. We have to be strong for her, Lila." But Lila didn't respond. She was lost in her sorrow, unable to hear anything but her own heartbreaking thoughts. "I don't know how to be her mother like this. I can't. She'll never be whole. I don't know how to give her the life she deserves." Her voice cracked as she broke down, her entire body shaking, her spirit shattered. Ethan didn't know what to say. He could only stand there, holding her hand, try to keep her grounded, trying to help her hold on when everything inside her was falling apart. Lila lay there in the hospital bed, trapped in her grief, her mind replaying the doctor's words again and again. "Your daughter may not have sight." It was all she could think about. Her beautiful baby, her perfect little girl, would never be able to see her face or the world around her. It was as if a piece of Lila's heart had been torn away. The door creaked open, and Ethan stepped in, holding their baby. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, but now, as she looked at Ethan, a mix of fear and longing overtook her. Ethan carefully handed the baby to Lila, his hands lingering for a moment, almost as if he didn't want to let go. Lila's hands trembled as she held her daughter for the first time. The baby was wrapped in a soft, white blanket, her tiny face pink and peaceful. Lila's heart swelled and broke all at once as she gently touched her baby's cheek. Tears filled Lila's eyes as she realized that her daughter would never be able to see her, never look into her eyes. Her heart shattered with the weight of that truth. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered through her tears. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Her body shook with silent sobs as she cradled her daughter, feeling the soft warmth of her skin. Lila's vision blurred as she stared at her, feeling the weight of the guilt pressing on her chest. All the dreams she had imagined for her daughter, the moments she had pictured, everything came crashing down. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "She's still our daughter," he said softly. "She's still perfect." But Lila couldn't hear him. She couldn't stop thinking about all the things her daughter would miss. The beauty of the world, the colors, the sunshine. Her baby would never know those things, and it was Lila's fault. Days passed, but Lila's pain didn't fade. She barely ate or slept. Every time she looked at her daughter, all she could see was what her baby would never have. The guilt ate away at her. She felt like she had failed her baby, like she had taken everything from her. The comments from strangers only made it worse. People online blamed Lila for what had happened, saying that her decision to have a natural birth had put the baby's health at risk. The cruelty of the words felt like daggers, confirming Lila's worst fears. She had made a mistake. She had failed her baby. Ethan tried to comfort her, but nothing seemed to reach her. She couldn't escape the darkness that had settled in her mind. She couldn't fix the past, and every moment felt like she was drowning in her own grief. One night, unable to take it anymore, Lila collapsed onto the cold hospital floor. She clutched the baby blanket, the soft fabric a cruel reminder of everything she had hoped for but couldn't have. She pressed the blanket to her face, searching for comfort, but it didn't come. Ethan stayed by her side, but Lila felt lost, unable to find her way back from the darkness that was swallowing her whole. She felt like a stranger in her own life. The world outside seemed distant, and she couldn't escape the suffocating weight of her guilt. The loss of what could have been, the fear of what her daughter's life would be like. It was all too much for Lila to bear. Lila didn't know how to get out of the sadness she felt. The days passed by quietly, and she spent her time feeling both sad and numb. The only sounds she heard were the beeping of the hospital machines and the soft footsteps of the nurses outside her room. Ethan, her husband, came to visit her every day. He was kind and patient, but even he seemed far away when he left. Every time he left, Lila felt even more alone, like the quiet made her pain feel stronger. One day, a nurse came into the room holding an envelope. She smiled a little and put it on the table beside Lila. "This came for you," the nurse said softly and left. Lila reached for the envelope, feeling curious but also nervous. She didn't know who would be sending her something right now. With shaky hands, she opened it and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a letter written in fancy handwriting. The letter started with, "Dear Lila, you don't know me, but I heard about your daughter. My heart hurts for you because I know how you feel. I'm a mother too, and my son was born unable to see, just like your little girl. Like you, I struggled to understand and accept it, and I felt a lot of pain and sadness." Lila's heart started to race as she read. It felt like the person who wrote this letter knew exactly what she was going through. The letter went on, "It was a long road, but I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me. Your daughter doesn't need you to be perfect. She doesn't need you to never feel sad or unsure. All she needs is your love. When she feels your warmth, your kindness, and the love in your eyes, that will be enough. That will be her light." Lila started crying. The words in the letter made her feel understood, like someone else had been through the same thing. She hugged the letter tightly to her chest as tears ran down her face. For the first time in a long time, she felt a little bit of hope. The letter continued, "I know it's hard, and you'll have days when you feel lost. But remember, there is beauty in the world that only people who love deeply can see. Your daughter will feel that beauty in you because she will feel your love. Don't let your pain become her darkness. Show her that love is stronger than anything else." Lila closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. The woman who wrote the letter had gone through the same pain, and somehow she had found peace. Lila took a deep breath, feeling a tiny bit of hope in her heart. Maybe she could do this. Maybe her daughter's life wouldn't be sad, but full of love. That evening, Ethan came into the room and saw Lila sitting up, looking a little brighter than before. He walked over to her gently and took her hand. "Lila," he asked softly. She looked at him, holding his hand tightly. There was something new in her eyes, a feeling of hope mixed with sadness. "I want to hold her," Lila said quietly. "I want to really see her." Ethan smiled, his eyes full of relief. He helped Lila sit up and swing her legs over the side of the bed. Even though she felt weak, something inside her felt stronger. When the nurse placed their daughter in her arms, Lila felt a deep love fill her heart. Her baby girl's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, and Lila kissed her forehead. "You're everything I need," she whispered to her daughter. "And I'm everything you need?" Lila felt a calmness inside her. The letter's words echoed in her mind. "When your daughter feels the love in your eyes, that will be the light she needs." Lila knew that no matter what challenges they faced, she would always be her daughter's light, guiding and loving her. From then on, Lila and Ethan decided to reach out to doctors to see what could help their daughter. It was a hard decision, but Lila knew it was the right one. They learned about doctors and special programs that could help their little girl. Lila began to see the doctors as part of her love for her daughter. Ethan was always by her side, asking questions and supporting her. Together, they learned a lot and felt closer as a family. Lila also started to feel proud of her daughter and wanted others to understand her story. One day, she decided to write a post on her phone to share what she had been through. She wrote about the pain and the love that had changed her. At first, she was scared to share it, but something inside her told her it was the right thing to do. When she posted it, she got messages from many mothers all over the world, telling her their stories and thanking her. Lila felt comforted by their words, knowing she wasn't alone. One message made her cry. "I went through something similar, Lila. Your story showed me that we are stronger than we think. Thank you for helping me find joy again." Lila felt proud of herself, her daughter, and her family. They were building a life filled with love. As the months passed, Lila and Ethan found joy in their new life. They went to therapy sessions, laughed together, and marveled at the little ways their daughter responded to the world. Lila no longer worried about the future. She was learning to enjoy every moment with her family. One afternoon, Lila sat on the back porch with Ethan and their daughter. Ethan was holding their little girl, and she reached out to Lila, laughing with happiness. Lila smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. In that moment, she knew they were home. Their family was full of love, and that love made everything feel right. Even though life wasn't perfect, it was theirs, and it was enough. Lila realized that her daughter had taught her more about love, courage, and happiness than she could have imagined. Together, they had created a life filled with love, understanding, and family. And Lila knew that no matter what challenges they faced, they would face them together with love. If you enjoyed this story and would like to see more content like it, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all our latest, inspiring and heartwarming stories and have the opportunity to engage with our growing community. Additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to sharing more captivating narratives with you.